It was several days before Daisy, Bert, Martha and Roderick picked up the courage to do anything other than eat the frozen food that the Ickabog brought them from the wagon and watch the monster eat the mushrooms it foraged for itself. Whenever the Ickabog went out, always rolling the enormous boulder into the mouth of the cave to stop them escaping, they discussed its strange ways but in low voices, in case it was lurking on the other side of the boulder listening. One thing they argued about was whether the Ickabog was a boy or a girl. Daisy, Bert and Roderick all thought it must be male because of the booming depth of its voice, but Martha, who had looked after sheep before her family had starved to death, thought the Ickabog was a girl. "Its belly is growing," she said. "I think it's going to have babies." The other thing the children discussed, of course, was exactly when the Ickabog was likely to eat them, and whether they were going to be able to fight it off when it tried. "I think we've got a bit of time yet," said Bert. "You two wouldn't make much of a meal," he said, looking at Daisy and Martha, who were still skinny from their time at the orphanage. "If I got it round the back of the neck," said Roderick, "and Bert hit it really hard in the stomach—" "We'll never be able to overpower the Ickabog," said Daisy. "It can move a boulder as big as itself. We're nowhere near strong enough." "If only we had a weapon or something," said Bert, kicking a stone across the cave. "Don't you think it's odd that all we've seen the Ickabog eat is mushrooms? Don't you feel as though it's pretending to be fiercer than it really is?" "It eats sheep," said Martha. "Where did all this wool come from if it hasn't eaten sheep?" "Maybe it just saves up wisps of wool caught on brambles," suggested Daisy. "I still don't understand why there aren't any bones in here if it's in the habit of eating creatures." "But what about the song it sings every night?" said Bert. "Gives me the creeps. If you ask me, that's a battle song." "I wonder what it means," said Daisy. A few minutes later, the giant boulder at the mouth of the cave shifted again, and the Ickabog reappeared with its two baskets, one full of mushrooms as usual, and the other packed with frozen Kurtzberg cheeses. Everyone ate without talking, as they always did, and after the Ickabog had tidied away its baskets and poked up the fire, it moved, as the sun was setting, to the mouth of the cave, ready to sing its strange song in the language the humans couldn't understand. Daisy stood up. "What are you doing?" whispered Bert, grabbing her ankle. "Sit down." "No," said Daisy, pulling herself free. "I want to talk to it." And so she walked boldly to the mouth of the cave and sat down beside the Ickabog. The Ickabog had just drawn breath with its unusual sound of an inflating bagpipe when Daisy said, "What language do you sing in, Ickabog?" The Ickabog looked down at her, startled to find Daisy so close. "Ickarish." "And what's the song about?" "It's the story of Ickabogs, and of your kind too." "You mean people?" asked Daisy. "People, yes," said the Ickabog. "The two stories are one story because people were bornded out of Ickabogs." "What does bornded mean? Is it the same as born?" "No," said the Ickabog. "Bornded is very different from being born. It's how new Ickabogs come to be." Daisy wanted to be polite, seeing how enormous the Ickabog was, so she said cautiously, "That does sound a bit like being born." "Well, it isn't," said the Ickabog. "Born and bornded are very different things. When babies are bornded, we who have bornded them die." "Always?" asked Daisy. "Always," said the Ickabog. "That is the way of the Ickabog. To live with your children is one of the strangenesses of people." "But that's so sad," said Daisy, "to die when your children are born." "It isn't sad at all," said the Ickabog. "The bonding is a glorious thing. Our whole lives lead up to the bonding. What we're doing and what we're feeling when our babies are bonded gives them their natures. It's very important to have a good bonding." "I don't understand," said Daisy. "If I die sad and hopeless, my babies won't survive. I've watched my fellow Ickabogs die in despair one by one, and their babies survive them only by seconds. An Ickabog can't live without hope. I'm the last Ickabog left, and my bonding will be the most important bonding in history, because if my bonding goes well, our species will survive. If not, Ickabogs will be gone forever. All our troubles began from a bad bonding, you know." "Is that what your song's about?" asked Daisy. "The bad bonding?" The Ickabog nodded, its eyes fixed on the darkening snowy marsh. Then it took yet another deep bagpipe breath and began to sing, this time in words that humans could understand. "At the dawn of time, when only Ickabogs existed, Stony Man was not created. With his cold, flint-hearted ways, then the world in its perfection was like heaven's bright reflection. No one hunted us or harmed us in those lost, beloved days. Oh, Ickabogs, come bounding back, my Ickabogs. Oh, Ickabogs, come bounding back, my own. Then tragedy, one stormy night, came bitterness, bounded of fright, and bitterness, so tall and stout, was different from its fellows. Its voice was rough, its ways were mean, the likes of it had not been seen before, and so they drove it out with angry blows and bellows. 1,000 miles from its old home, in bounding time arrived, alone in darkness, bitterness expired, and hatred came to being. A hairless Ickabog, this last, a beast sworn to avenge the past. With bloodlust was the creature fired, its evil eye far-seeing. Then hatred spawned the race of man. 'Twas from ourselves that man began. From bitterness and hate they swelled to armies raised to smite us. In hundreds Ickabogs were slain. Our blood poured on the land like rain. Our ancestors like trees were felled, and still men came to fight us. Men forced us from our sunlit home, away from grass to mud and stone, into the endless fog and rain, and here we stayed and dwindled, till of our race there's only one, survivor of the spear and gun, whose children must begin again, with hate and fury kindled. Oh, Ickabogs, now kill the men, my Ickabogs. Oh, Ickabogs, now kill the men, my own. Daisy and the Ickabog sat in silence for a while after the Ickabog had finished singing. The stars were coming out now. Daisy fixed her eyes on the moon as she said, "How many people have you eaten, Ickabog?" The Ickabog sighed. "None so far. Ickabogs like mushrooms." "Are you planning on eating us when your bounding time comes? So your babies are born believing Ickabogs kill people? You want to turn them into people-eaters, don't you, to take back your land?" The Ickabog looked down at her. It didn't seem to want to answer, but at last it nodded its huge head. Behind Daisy and the Ickabog, Bert, Martha and Roderick exchanged terrified glances by the light of the dying fire. "I know what it's like to lose people you love the most," said Daisy quietly. "My mother died and my father disappeared. For a long time after my father went away, I made myself believe that he was still alive, because I had to, or I think I would have died as well. I think people need hope nearly as much as Ickabogs do. But," she said, placing her hand over her heart, "my mother and father are both still in here, and they always will be. So when you eat me, Ickabog, eat my heart last. I'd like to keep my parents alive as long as I can." She walked back into the cave, and the 4 humans settled down on their piles of wood again beside the fire. A little later, sleepy though she was, Daisy thought she heard the Ickabog sniff.